Add a UV sphere. Give it shade smooth. Open shading view. Create a new material for this sphere. Add texture coordinate node. The texture coordinate node provides us with a number of different ways to apply textures to our 3D models, and for different 3D models we need to choose the right way to do the mapping. Here we will use the object property. The reason for this is that when applying textures to multiple static models with different spatial dimensions, the object properties ensure that the textures are displayed at the same density and do not stretch to a larger size, etc. Add mapping node. The role of the mapping node is to adjust the relative position, size, and scale of the texture and UV coordinates. The object property of the texture coordinate node is connected to the vector property of the mapping node. Add wave texture node. The wave texture node creates a wave pattern on a flat surface. In the last video, we also used the wave texture node. The output vector property of the mapping node is connected to the vector property of the wave texture node. Add color ramp node. Here it is mainly used to control the height and fall of the waves. The color property of the wave texture node is connected to the fact property of the color ramp node. Add noise texture node. The noise texture node is used to generate noise on the basis of the received texture coordinates using the Perlin noise algorithm. The output vector property of the mapping node is connected to the vector property of the noise texture node. Add bump node. The bump node outputs normals, which will give the material a bumpy texture. The fact property of the noise texture node is connected to the height property of the bump node. The alpha property of the color ramp node is connected to the normal property of the bump node. The output normal property of the bump node is connected to the normal property of the principled BSDF node. The second bump node in the video can be left out. Next is the parameter adjustment. You can refer to my parameter adjustment. You can also adjust the parameter according to your own preference. Change material name to procedural sand. Create a group of these 8 nodes called sand with waves. Add another set of texture coordinate nodes, mapping nodes, wave texture nodes, color ramp nodes, principled BSDF nodes. The first 4 nodes are connected as in the sand with waves group. The color ramp node is not connected to the principled BSDF node. Add math node. The Mixer GB node is mainly used for blending images or mapping, and its parameter options are similar to Photoshop's layer blending modes. Connect the color property of the color ramp node in the sand with waves group to the color 2 property of the Mixer GB node. Connect the color property of another color ramp node to the color 1 property of the Mixer GB node. Add displacement node. The function of the displacement node is to move each vertex in the direction of the normals, thus allowing the face to change shape. The color property of the Mixer GB node is linked to the height property of the displacement node. The displacement property of the displacement node is linked to the displacement property of the material output node. You can see what the material looks like now. Add a third mapping node. Add a second noise texture node. Add a third color ramp node. Connect the 3 nodes in the same way. Connect the color property of the third color ramp node to the fact property of the Mixer GB node. Add Mix Shader node. As the name suggests, the Mix Shader node serves to mix the 2 shaders, controlling the weight of the 2 shaders through the fact attribute. Unconnects the principled BSDF node from the material output node in the sand with waves group. Connect each of the 2 principled BSDF nodes to the 2 shader properties of the Mix Shader node. Connect the color property of the third color ramp node to the fact property of the Mix Shader node. Connect the shader property of the mix shader node to the surface property of the material output node. Connect the object property of the texture coordinate node in the sand with waves group to the vector property of the third mapping node. Create the third batch of added mapping nodes, noise texture nodes, and color ramp nodes as a group called Mix Sand Waves. Create the second batch of texture coordinate nodes, mapping nodes, wave texture nodes, color ramp nodes, and principal BSDF nodes as a group called Sand Without Waves. You can refer to the parameters of the nodes in the Sand Without Waves group or adjust them to your liking. You can also refer to the parameters of the nodes in the Mix Sand Waves group or adjust them to your liking. Open Geometry Nodes view. Select the desert terrain we created in the last video. Add Set Material node. Set Material node adds a material to the geometry. Select the procedural sand material we just created. Going into the rendered view, you can see that we have created a very realistic desert. Make a copy of the desert terrain. Open Geometry Nodes view. Copy the procedural sand material and rename it. Increase the size of the terrain a bit. Then adjust the parameters of the nodes in the desert base shape group. Then adjust the parameters of the nodes in the dunes roundness group. Finally, adjust the parameters of the nodes in the adding details group. By adjusting these parameters, the desert terrain is made more elevated and used as a distant desert landscape. Adjust the distant desert terrain to the right position. You can adjust it to your liking. We have now finished creating the desert and the animation. Next time I'll show you how to make sky, so stay tuned.